A lot of people told me that Red Rising was okay as an introduction to the series, it's a good primer, but they also said that Golden Sun was vastly superior, it's a lot more in-depth, there's a lot more interesting characters that are introduced, and for everyone that told me that, you were correct. In Red Rising, Darrow discovers the truth about the world that he lives in, and he gains clarity about who his true enemies are. In Golden Sun, the lines between enemy and ally begin to blur again. Who are his friends? Who are his enemies? Does he want justice, or does he just want revenge? And if he can't have both, which one will he choose? Welcome to Paperback Journeys, where today we're going to be talking about Golden Sun, which is the second book in the Red Rising series. You know, for the most part, I'm going to try to avoid talking about any spoilers in this book, but since Golden Sun is the second book in the series, if you haven't already read the first book, Red Rising, then this isn't going to be the video for you. Just a heads up. I think the biggest difference that became immediately apparent between Red Rising and Golden Sun was that whereas Red Rising felt a lot more like a YA kind of a novel, you know, in the vein of The Hunger Games or Divergence, this book widened the scope so that it felt a lot more like a space opera. It wasn't so much about Darrow's own personal journey, although there is some of that involved, obviously. He's the main protagonist and everything is told from his point of view. It's more about, though, the role that he was playing in the grander scheme of things. And that was, for me, a lot more interesting. Talking about the scope, I love how the story opens up in the early chapters and we find ourselves on Luna, and this is where we're introduced to a fresh set of characters who all feel as though they are extensions of the characters that we've already met in the previous book. It's like we've kind of zoomed out and now we're seeing the bigger picture. We're seeing the families and the friends and the factions that the original characters belong to, and what, you know, hints at why they are the way that they are. For example, Pax Telemanus from the first book, we see why he is the way that he is after we meet his family in the very early chapters of the book. Darrow himself seems very different as well, and I think that's maybe in part because he's been living within this society of the Golds now for a couple of years, but also in the first book, he seemed almost invincible. Do you know what I mean? Like, but in this installment, he's kind of presented as more of like a vulnerable character who's facing almost insurmountable odds. And for me, that makes him a lot more likable, a lot easier to kind of root for, a lot more relatable as well, as he's kind of like navigating the political landscape that he's in. He's an outsider, he's a fish out of water, but now he's a bit more acclimatized to the world of the Golds. And even as he's forming these alliances, Pierce Brown is able to remind us quite regularly that he, in reality, is completely alone because he's undercover and he's behind enemy lines. And so he has a lot of these moments where he's able to quietly sit and reflect on that fact. He's cut off from his people and he's just waiting to hear back from the Son of Ares, or the Sons of Ares, sorry, the group, and he doesn't even know if they're still around. I'd say Darrow's closest ally is Mustang, and as the daughter of the Augustus family, she's very rebellious. She's a constant thorn in her family's side. But then again, who in the Augustus clan isn't a thorn in the family side? You've got Darrow, obviously, straight off the bat. He's infiltrated them and is actively working against them. Then you've got Mustang, and then you've got the bloody Jackal. Nero Augustus has got his absolute hands full. The interesting thing I think about Mustang is that she challenges the status quo even though she's a part of an elite family. And it shows Darrow, I think, that she's just an example that not all Golds are inherently bad. They're kind of victims of circumstance as much as the Reds are, in a way. Not quite as much, obviously. But the question is, how deep does Mustang's rejection of the status quo go? Will it still be there when things start to get a little bit uncomfortable, you know? Because everyone wants to be a rebel until there is a real rebellion. And then people start getting a little bit like, maybe I like my cozy little life. That's the big question, I think, that is surrounding Mustang, and the reason why Darrow is just not sure if he can trust her, you know? Another character that I think improved after being given a lot more depth and a lot more time to kind of develop was Cassius. In this book, he is portrayed as a much more tragic figure. I feel like in Red Rising, he was kind of like this dashing, cocky, verging on arrogant character. He's just one of life's winners. In this book, after he suffered a bit more as he did in the first book, his real aim is just to be a dutiful son and fulfill the expectations that are put upon him by the Society of the Golds. But despite all of his efforts, everything around him is just falling down. In the last book, obviously, he suffered the loss of his brother, and then Darrow, he feels as though Darrow betrayed him in a way, even though I feel like that's a little bit hypocritical. I mean, they all did things in the passage that I think could be frowned upon, but because it's Cassius's brother, he takes it personally. But anyway, he does feel as though Darrow betrayed him, and they wasn't even friends at the time. But let's just put that to one side. And so in Golden Sun, Cassius is this much angrier character. He wants to seek his own form of retribution, and he's lost some of his polish. And I feel like this is another good example of the way that the structure of the society that the Golds have built really serves nobody. Because just as the Reds are the obvious victims of oppression, the Golds are kind of victims of their own privilege in a way that, I mean, they're blind to their role as the oppressors. They see themselves as the good guys. They're the ones that are upholding society, even though we know that's wrong. They're just completely blind to it because they've all been indoctrinated by the society that they live in. And so this really adds to the frustration, I think, that Cassius feels and that all of the Golds feel when they are faced with resistance from groups like the Son of Ares or other factions that might exist within the world. They are kind of acting like, why are you attacking us? We've always been here. That's very interesting to me. I mean, there's so many characters in this book that I could talk about, but I'd be here all day. So I'll just pick one other character that I thought was really interesting, and that is Severo. The reason that I find my dog is snoring so loudly at the moment. Sorry. The reason that I find Severo to be an interesting character is because he's one that typically I would like a lot. He's the wild card. He's kind of a rogue, and this is the archetype that, yeah, I normally enjoy quite a lot in fiction. But the thing that is preventing me from just loving this guy is the constant howling. And I don't know how you feel about this. Actually, that'll be the question in the video. Comment down below. Does the howling annoy you? I understand that it's part of his character and part of the persona that he built up in the first book when he was wearing the wolf pelt and he was with all of the howlers and they all howl. I understand. And I even understand it as well when he's kind of pumped up and he just howls and I get it. People might even do that in our world, you know. They're kind of like, woo, you know, they kind of get pumped up. But what about the parts where someone passes away and all the howlers start howling? That are howlers. And does Severo actually think that they are wolves? I think that they do. I think that they actually believe that they are wolves. I mean, can you imagine, like, I want you to really imagine this scenario. Imagine you've just lost a good friend, right? And you're just absolutely overcome with emotions. And then you look to your left and you see your other friend looking at you going, "Oh." You'd go, "What are you doing, mate? Come on now." One thing I really enjoy, and I've kind of spoken a little bit about this already, is the themes of power and privilege and shifting loyalties. I like the way that Darrow is navigating the political realm of the Golds. He's bonding with some key players. And what's difficult, I think, for Darrow, but also for us as the reader, is to see where the line is between genuine bonds and just infiltration. Like, who are these people really his friends? And I'm starting to get like a sneaky suspicion that eventually what's going to happen is that Darrow's going to have to choose between the allegiances that he has with the Reds and the new ones that he's formed with the Golds. And I have a feeling that in a lot of circumstances, he would choose the bonds that he's made with the Golds. I really think that, especially when it comes to, for example, Mustang over some of the people that he knows from the mines, from back in the day. We've already seen that Darrow is willing to sacrifice Reds for the greater good. He did that with, I think his name was Titus in the first book. He knew that Titus was a Red, but he was willing to sacrifice him for the greater good. I think he'd be definitely willing to do that, but he might even show preferential treatment to his new friends, the Golds. He's starting to sort of inhabit that role as a Gold. And I think there's a point in this book that I thought was really interesting where he admits to himself, if I was born a Gold, I would probably be a worse person than Cassius. Cassius is a good man, but he's just been born into this station of privilege. And I find that really interesting. And what I am going to be interested in as the series develops is Darrow going to be faced with these choices? Is it going to, become a bit of a moral dilemma where he has to choose between his current life and his old life? And will he forget where he came from? I think the pacing of Golden Sun is really good. It always felt as though the tension was building. And I don't recall a point in the book where I ever felt bored. This is definitely what I would refer to as a page turner. Pierce Brown's writing, I think, is simple, and I don't think anyone would describe it as beautiful, the prose, but it is engaging and it is vivid. The world of Red Rising is just thoroughly fleshed out, I think. The technology, the families, the factions, they all feel fully realized. And I think that even though the world building is very detailed, it never feels overwhelming. So you're able really to get the best of both worlds, where it feels, like I say, just fully fleshed out. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of world building, but it's kind of passed out at a good pace, so that you're always able to take it on. It's impressive, actually. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to give the ratings, and then after I give the ratings, I'm actually going to talk about my favorite scenes in the book as well. So if you haven't already read Golden Sun, then you can watch the ratings if you want to, but then after that, I'd suggest that you don't watch beyond that. I'll give you a spoiler warning before I do it, so don't worry, you're not going to accidentally stumble into it. But let's get to the ratings. Okay, so let's start with the plot. I thought that the plot was just solid, and it wouldn't really be fair for me to give it anything less than 5 stars. 5-star plot, no questions. The characters, I liked the characters a lot more in this book than I did in Red Rising, especially Darrow. I found him to be much more likable, and so I'll give the characters 4.5 stars. As I've mentioned quite a lot in this review, the setting is just really well realized. The spacecrafts, the tech, the families, the factions, perfect world building, 5 stars. Originality, I wouldn't say this is the most original book. A young, oppressed rebel fights against an empire by infiltrating it, but it had enough elements that made it feel fresh. So I would say 3.5 stars out of 5 for originality. And then overall, the most important question really is, did I enjoy myself? Yeah, I did. 4 stars out of 5 overall for Golden Sun. Okay, so this is the part in the book now where I'm going to talk about my favorite scenes in the book. I am going to dive into some spoilers. So if you haven't already read Golden Sun and you're planning on reading it, then this is the point where I'd suggest maybe you would like to subscribe, come back later, and then we can kind of discuss the book a bit more, talk about the specific scenes and see if we enjoyed the same elements of the book. Okay, so let's get to my favorite scenes of Golden Sun. I think the first scene that really stuck with me was Nero Augustus remembering his favorite son, Claudius. And this is really just a couple of lines that are put in there, but I think it just gives us a clear picture of Nero's motivations and hatred for the Bologna family. He's talking about his favorite son, Claudius, and he says that Claudius was a special boy. And then one day, Carnus, Bologna, took liberties with a young woman that Claudius was very taken with, and so Claudius challenged Carnus to a duel to kind of restore her honor and probably repair some of his pride as well. And then Carnus smashed his head against cobbled stones and broke it open, and I think this is the quote, all of that specialness spilled out. Ugh, gross. And that's heavy. That's heavy, man, And as far as I understand, Nero Augustus witnessed that. I think he was there and he witnessed it. Yeah, and so it's moments like that when you think to yourself, yeah, this isn't young adult, is it? I don't think this can fall into the young adult category anymore. And I think that this dialogue it really informs the next scene, which I also thought was really good. And that's the scene where Darrow challenges Cassius to a duel. The scene kind of starts out and it seems as though Darrow might set off a bomb whilst all of the influential golds of the society are all gathered in the same place. But then he thinks to himself, no, this isn't what Io would have wanted. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. And so, by me blowing up this place, more golds will take their place. And then everything will just fall back in line with the way that it always was. And the power and the hierarchy will all be restored. And that's not what Io wanted. And that's not what Darrow wants. That's just what people who are angry and in their feelings want. And so what Darrow kind of decides, and he comes up with this plan in the moment, is that he's going to try to spark a civil war between the golds and do kind of irreparable damage to the society. So then Darrow runs over to Augustus and he says to him, listen, I think he needs his approval, kind of, right? So he says, I want you to have me as your champion and let me take out Cassius. Let me challenge Cassius to a duel. And so he does so, and you can see the hunger in Nero Augustus's eyes. You can just see he's like, yeah, go get him for his boy, right? For Claudius, like an act of revenge. And so Darrow is facing off with Cassius, and it seems like, this is a bit of a mismatch. Cassius is well trained, has been training all his life in his specialized style of fighting, which I can't remember the name of it now. Is it Kratos or Cravat? Is it Cravat? I don't know. It could be. And everyone is expecting a quick victory for Cassius, but then Darrow drops the bombshell. He was trained by Lorne O. Arcos. And at this point, I was thinking to myself, wait, is this the second book? Did I accidentally skip to the third book? Because I don't remember that. And I got a little bit nervous. I thought, oh no, I've missed a vital scene where he got trained. But actually, although it's hinted at, we don't actually ever get to see that training. It's just like a big reveal. I don't know how I felt about that, but it is what it is. And so Darrow just absolutely messes up Cassius. He kind of dominates him, really, and it forces Octavia O'Loon to stop the fight, and by doing so, she shows a preference for the Bolognas. And so this just, exactly as Darrow wanted, this just creates a division between the societies of the Golds. Mission accomplished. I really like the scenes where Darrow is preparing to get shot out of what I think is called like the spit tubes. Basically when he's going to get shot out of the ships in the Iron Rain. And there were a couple of scenes where this happened. The first one is where Darrow and Severo are both put into spit tubes, and they're about to board the ship that eventually becomes called Pax, the ship that Darrow takes command of. And I could picture this scene so vividly. I think Pierce Brown really took his time to build up the tension in this scene. Darrow's thinking back to his time in the mines and the lessons that his father taught him, and he can hear Mustang's voice coming over in his comms unit, and he's about to be launched through space in this crazy maneuver that they've got planned out, and he's going to land directly in to enemy territory where he knows it's going to be all chaos, and this is like the calm before the storm, and he just has to focus and breathe and breathe, and it's just, it's coming, it's coming. I thought this scene was epic because after that moment of calm where he's closing his eyes and he's trying to center himself, boom, he's shot out of the cannon, shot out of the spit tube, and he's flying through space and he's coming up to the spaceship. Oh man, goosebumps, brother, goosebumps. And then the other scene where they're all about to be shot out into space and into a battle is the build up to Iron Rain, where they're about to invade Mars to kind of reclaim it for the Augustus clan. Again, it's that kind of tension building. It's really a mirror of the first scene, but it's got a bit more depth to it because we have a lot more characters that are involved, and we get to revisit each one of the characters as Darrow goes around and has a little chat with them, and old scores are settled. They're all kind of saying to each other, listen, if we survive this, I'll see you on the other side. Good luck, and I love that kind of camaraderie as the group all come together after they've all been through so much up until this point. And I especially like the scenes once all of the characters that are about to invade Mars are in their individual tubes, and they're all speaking to each other over the comms units, and they're remembering the glory days of the Institute. And it just reminds us, I think, as the reader, that we have a history with these people. So yeah, it in that way, it kind of heightens the stakes because you go, yeah, this is a collective of people that I really enjoy, and I hope everyone makes it to the other side. Another scene that I enjoyed quite a lot, and I think it's maybe a lot down to just the visuals of the scene and the setting, is meeting Lorne O'Arkos when Darrow goes to meet Lorne and effectively try and recruit him for the Augustus family. As soon as we get to meet Lorne, I was imagining him to look exactly like Liam Neeson in Batman Begins. I can't remember that character's name. I think it might be like Ras Al Ghul or something like that. Anyway, the planet that Lorne lives on sounds so beautiful. They're kind of standing on a cliff edge and looking out at the ocean, at the wild waves. I just thought that it sounded so epic where he was living. And he's a good man, but now he feels like he just wants to be completely isolated, let the society do whatever it will. He feels completely disillusioned, I think, and feels that he has no power to revive a society that he felt had so much potential to do good and is now a shell of what it could have been. And unfortunately, he doesn't realize that, like it or not, he is going to play a part in this upcoming civil war. He really has no choice. Everybody has to pick a side. No one's going to be allowed to sit on the fence. There's actually the scene where I think her name is Aja. I think that's how you pronounce it. I didn't listen to the audiobook. I just read the physical book. But she arrives on Lorne's planet and she says, listen, you have to choose. And Lorne says, I'm not going to play a part in this. And Darrow, who's next to him, whispers, the strong always have to play a part. And I just like that Pierce Brown has kind of found another way of saying that famous Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's exactly the message here, right? Lorne is a very powerful character. And if he can't just be Switzerland in this scenario. He can't sit out. This is going to be a conflict that affects everybody. Another scene that I just absolutely loved was when Darrow returned to the mines. He just wanted to revisit what was previously Eo's grave and just sit there and talk to her in a way, and then also see his mother. And I found this scene to be so relatable. I think anyone who's ever left their hometown and then returned to it after having a lot of experiences of their own, everything just seems a little bit different, even though it looks the same. Obviously, people are older now, and it feels as though things have almost kind of faded and become smaller. Looking at your hometown through the eyes of an outsider, but still knowing that this is the place that is responsible for making me who I am. It's a really strange and nostalgic feeling. And I think that Darrow really experiences this. And I think it's portrayed really well by Pierce Brown in this scene. And I also loved how he was able to sit down with his mother and have that nice moment. And she wasn't fooled for a second. She knew immediately who he was. And I felt that maybe this was the most heartfelt scene in the series so far, that he's able to have this quiet moment. He was expecting Mustang to stay outside, or he let her know who he truly was and invited her to come in. Obviously, it's disappointing that she disappeared, but at this stage in the series, I don't know exactly what's happened. I have my suspicions, obviously, because of the next scene that I'm about to talk about, but, I'm looking forward to when Darrow sees Mustang again, because, man, that was heartbreaking when he walked outside and saw that she'd run off, basically. Yeah. Devastating, really. And, obviously, let's talk about that final scene, which was Red Wedding style shocking. So many characters got taken out. Unbelievable, really. And who did we lose? We lost Victra. She was playing a big part. We lost Lorne. I couldn't believe that we lost Lorne. Then we lost Nero Augustus, and Roke turned on him, just like Mustang turned on him. And so now Darrow's getting a better idea of, this is what these golds are about, They ain't got no loyalty to me once they find out who and what I am. They immediately turn on me. And I was thinking at this point, wow, this is just too much. And then what comes next? Open the box. Fitchner's head in a box, a.k.a. Ares, the leader of the Son of Ares. I think I've mentioned before that one thing I really respect about Pierce Brown is how he's able to nail down an ending for each book I mean, I've only read 2 of them so far, but both of them have had a good, solid ending to the book where we get a satisfying resolution, but then it ends. So it's like after the climax, we get a moment where there's a cliffhanger that makes us want to find out what's going to be happening next. And the good thing is that I'm going to be reading, I think it's Morning Star is the next book. So I can't wait to find out which direction this goes in. New battle lines have been drawn. Where does Mustang stand at this point? I honestly don't know. Will Roke remain alongside the Bolognas now? Come on, Roke, you're better than that. Anyway, if you'd like to see my review of Morning Star, where we get to find out together, what's up? What direction do we go from here? Then you can click up here to see the review. Thanks so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. And as always, happy reading.